AITA for letting my father reveal the truth about my ex-wife and brother at dinner. I'm Connor, 39, and 4 years ago I signed divorce papers after finding out that Brooke, my wife at the time, had been sleeping with my older brother, Caleb. For a long time, I thought losing my marriage would be the worst part. It wasn't. The worst part was showing up around my own family afterward and realizing that my pain had become an inconvenience everyone wanted managed. The affair was described as messy. Caleb had made a mistake. Brooke had been unhappy for a long time. I was the one who was supposedly angry, difficult, controlling, and unable to move forward. I'm also the guy who brings pecan pie to family dinners because my mother, Helen, somehow burns the crust while leaving the middle half raw. For a while, that was the only safe fact anyone wanted to remember about me. Before everything happened, Caleb was the person I called when I needed perspective. He was 3 years older, louder than me, and the kind of person who could tell a story badly and still have everyone leaning in. He always seemed impossible to embarrass. Growing up, I mistook that confidence for strength. Brooke liked it too. She and I had been married for 7 years. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it also wasn't the dead, loveless arrangement she later described to anyone who would listen. We still had Sunday breakfast together. We still argued over which movies to watch. We still talked about replacing the old dining table and whether we should take a trip for our anniversary. The first thing that felt wrong was her phone. Brooke had never been secretive with it. Then suddenly, it was always face down. She carried it from room to room. If I walked into the kitchen while she was texting, she would lock the screen and ask why I was sneaking up on her. I wasn't sneaking. I lived there. Caleb changed too. He stopped dropping by without warning. When we were in the same room, he became overly casual, asking broad questions about whether I was doing okay and whether marriage was wearing me down. At first, I explained it away. People tell themselves comforting stories before they accept an ugly one. The restaurant receipt was the first thing I couldn't explain. It was from a place Brooke had mentioned wanting to try. The charge appeared on our shared card on a Thursday night when she said she was staying with her friend Rachel because Rachel was having trouble with her boyfriend. The receipt showed dinner for two cocktails, and a dessert Brooke always ordered. I asked her about it the next morning. She was standing at the kitchen counter drinking coffee and scrolling through her phone. "Did you and Rachel go out last night?" I asked. She didn't look up. For a little while. "To Bellini's?" That got her attention. She set the phone down. "Why?" "The charge is on our card." Brooke's expression changed so quickly I almost missed it. Surprise first. Then calculation. Then anger. "You're checking my spending now?" "It's a shared account." "That doesn't mean you get to interrogate me." I asked where you ate. "No, Connor. You're looking for something." I remember staring at her and thinking how strange it was that she sounded offended before I had accused her of anything. "I'm trying to understand why you told me you stayed in all night." She pushed away from the counter. "You're turning into someone I don't recognize." "No," I said. "I'm recognizing things I used to explain away." She left without finishing her coffee. That same weekend, Caleb canceled plans with me. He said he had a stomach bug. Brooke said she needed space and spent Saturday afternoon away from the house. I called Rachel. I didn't accuse Brooke of cheating. I only asked if everything was okay with her boyfriend. Rachel went quiet. Then she said, "Why wouldn't it be?" That was enough. I wish I could say I handled the discovery with perfect calm. I didn't. I checked the phone records attached to our account and found repeated late-night calls between Brooke and Caleb. I confronted Brooke. She denied it until I said Caleb's number out loud. Then she sat down. She didn't cry. She said, "It wasn't supposed to happen." I asked how long. She told me it had only been a few weeks. That was the first version. Later, the messages showed it had been going on for almost 8 months. I called Caleb from the kitchen while Brooke sat at the table. He answered on the third ring. "Hey," he said cautiously. "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" There was a pause, then a long exhale. "Connor, don't do this over the phone." "Then come say it to my face." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Of course you don't." Brooke stood and said I was escalating things. I remember laughing at the word because my brother had been sleeping with my wife, but somehow my phone call was the dangerous development. Caleb didn't come over. He did leave me a voicemail 2 nights later. He was drunk enough to slur some of the words, but not so drunk that the meaning was unclear. He said Brooke had been lonely. He said I had always made people feel like they had to earn my approval. Then he said, "You were never enough for her, man." Maybe you should be honest about that. I saved it. Not because I had some grand plan. At the time, I saved it because I couldn't believe my own brother had said it. The divorce moved quickly once Brooke realized I wasn't going to reconcile. She tried to convince me that the affair was a symptom, not a cause. She said we had both contributed to the failure of the marriage. I told her I was willing to discuss every problem we had, but I wasn't willing to divide responsibility for her decision to sleep with Caleb. That made me rigid. During the legal process, the affair timeline mattered because Brooke had used our shared accounts, continued living with me, and signed paperwork related to our mortgage and insurance while hiding the relationship. Some records came through normal financial disclosures. One email excerpt came from her attorney after mine requested communications relevant to the timeline. It was a message Brooke had sent to a friend months before she filed for divorce. The useful line was simple. Connor is starting to notice things. Caleb says we just need to keep everything normal until we know what we're doing. I didn't need the rest of the email. I didn't want the rest. I signed the divorce papers at my kitchen counter because I refused to cry in a lawyer's waiting room. The house felt hollow by then. Brooke had moved out. Half the cabinets were empty. A pale rectangle remained on the wall where she had taken a framed photograph. I signed each page, slid the stack into the return envelope, and stood there with the pen in my hand longer than I want to admit. Then the family version of the story began. Brooke told people I had been emotionally cold and controlling. Caleb told relatives that he had made a terrible mistake, but that the marriage had already been over in every way that mattered. That phrase spread quickly, already over. It made everyone's life easier. If the marriage was already over, then Caleb hadn't really destroyed anything. If Brooke had been trapped and unhappy, then her lying became understandable. If I was controlling and emotionally absent, then my anger afterward looked less like betrayal and more like proof. At first, I fought it. I showed my mother some of the messages. I called my father, Richard, and tried to explain the timeline. I corrected cousins when they repeated things Brooke had said. Every defense I made became another piece of evidence against me. See, one relative told Sean. Connor is obsessed with proving he was right. I was obsessed with proving I wasn't what they were calling me. There is a difference, but nobody cared about it then. My mother's response hurt the most. Helen wasn't cruel. Cruel would have been easier. Cruel gives you something clean to reject. She was afraid. She wanted holidays back. She wanted birthdays where nobody had to choose which brother to invite. She wanted photographs in which everyone stood close enough to look normal. The first time she asked me to forgive Caleb, we were washing dishes after a small family lunch. Your brother is still family, she said. I put a plate in the drying rack and looked at her. So was I. That's not what I mean. It's exactly what you mean. His place is permanent. Mine depends on whether I make everyone comfortable. She started crying, which immediately made me feel like the aggressor. I just don't want to lose either of you. You already asked one of us to accept the loss. My father was quieter. Richard listened when I spoke, but he rarely gave me more than, I understand, or, I'm sorry this happened. At the time, his neutrality felt like a decision. Caleb disappeared from most family gatherings. He and Brooke moved through life as a couple, but kept their distance from the larger family. That made it easier for everyone to pretend the conflict was cooling down. I was the one still present, so I became the visible problem. I also gave people material. For 2 months after the divorce, I drank more than I should have. I sent Brooke 3 angry emails I regret. I sent Caleb one message at 2 in the morning telling him he had spent his whole life confusing attention with respect. It was true, but 2 in the morning was not the time to say it. I skipped family gatherings. I snapped at my father once when he asked whether I had considered counseling. I told him the family needed counseling more than I did. That was also probably true, but I said it like a weapon. Sean was the only person who never asked me to make the betrayal easier to look at. He's my cousin, 1 year younger than me, and we had been close since we were kids. He didn't tell me to forgive. He didn't tell me to ruin Caleb's life either. He came over one night, took the whiskey bottle off my counter, and poured it down the sink. You can be right and still destroy yourself, he said. I'm fine. You're wearing the same shirt you had on yesterday. It's comfortable. It has mustard on it. I looked down. He was right. Sean handed me a glass of water. Don't give Caleb the version of you he's been selling. That sentence stayed with me. I stopped drinking for a while. I stopped answering messages when I was angry. I reduced contact with relatives who treated my divorce like a debate topic. and I started documenting. Not spying, not hacking, not chasing Brooke around. I saved what I already legally had, printed screenshots from the phone account, the restaurant receipt, the voicemail, the disclosed email excerpt, copies of financial records, and messages relatives sent me that repeated Caleb's claims. I kept everything in a file box in the back of a closet. For 4 years, I barely touched it. Then my mother called. Her voice had that overly careful tone people use when they think they're delivering bad news gently. "We're having everyone over Saturday," she said. "Grace is coming, and some of the cousins. Your father wants to talk about a few family matters." "What family matters?" He didn't say exactly. That sounded like my father. Richard believed information should be released in measured amounts, usually after everyone else had become frustrated. Helen continued, "Caleb may come." I stared at the wall across from me. "May." He said he's planning to. "With Brooke?" There was a pause. "I think so." "You think so?" "I think it would mean a lot if everyone could just be civil." There it was. "Not." I told them not to provoke you. "Not. I understand this will be difficult. Just civil." "I can be civil," I said. "I'm not agreeing to be quiet if they lie about me." "Connor, please. I just want one peaceful night." "Peaceful for who?" She didn't answer. I almost declined. I had spent 4 years learning that avoiding a trap wasn't cowardice. But 2 things bothered me. First, my father wanted to discuss family matters, and Caleb was suddenly returning after years of distance. Second, Helen had not said she wanted us to reconcile. She had said Richard wanted everyone there. I called Sean. He listened, then said, "Caleb doesn't come back unless he wants something." That was my thought. What does your dad need to discuss? No idea. Money. Maybe. Estate planning. Property. Something like that. Sean was quiet for a moment. "Bring facts," he said. "I don't want to walk in with a courtroom exhibit." "Then don't. Bring only what you need." I pulled the file box out of the closet that evening. Dust had settled along the lid. Inside were 4 years of things I had worked hard not to think about. I chose 5 items. The text timeline showed Brooke and Caleb's calls and messages starting months before the night she claimed the affair began. The restaurant receipt. The short email excerpt. A transcript of Caleb's voicemail, though I also kept the audio on my phone. And a copy of a bank record my father had sent me 2 weeks earlier without explanation. That record was the piece I didn't understand. It showed 3 transfers from Richard to Caleb during the months after my separation. Together, they were a little over $30,000. In the notes, Richard had written Connor's situation, legal support, and emergency. I had never received any of that money. I called my father after he sent the document, but he only said, "Bring it Saturday." "Why did you transfer money to Caleb with my name attached?" "We'll talk when everyone is here." That's not an answer. "No," he said. "It isn't. I should have given you one sooner." Then he ended the call. I placed the documents in a plain brown envelope and sealed it. Sean came by Friday night. He looked through the copies without reading every line. "What's the goal?" he asked. "To stop them from using my name. Not to make Brooke cry? No. Not to get Caleb thrown out. That would be a bonus, but no." Sean gave me a look. I sighed. "The goal is to correct the story if they start telling it again." "Good. Facts first. Feelings after. I'm not going there to beg anyone to believe me." "Then don't. Give them something they have to answer." Saturday afternoon, I bought the ingredients for the pecan pie. It may sound ridiculous, but baking it helped. There was something useful about following exact steps. Butter, brown sugar, eggs, vanilla, pecans, heat, time. No hidden meaning. No alternative version. The dinner was being held in my parents' backyard. By the time I arrived, 2 folding tables had been pushed together under the covered patio. Paper plates were stacked beside a pitcher of iced tea. Someone had brought store-bought rolls and left them in the plastic tray. Aunt Grace was guarding the dessert table from 2 younger relatives who kept trying to lift the foil. "You're late," she told me. "I'm 7 minutes early. Your mother has decided anything after 3 is late." I held up the pie. Grace moved aside. "You may pass." She was my father's sister, 61, sharp-eyed and not especially sentimental. She had never directly accused me of being bitter, but she had once told me there were probably truths on both sides. At the time, I told her that facts didn't split themselves in half just because 2 people were talking. We hadn't discussed it since. Sean was already there. He sat near one end of the table and tapped the chair beside him. My mother moved around the patio too quickly, adjusting napkins that didn't need adjusting. My father sat in a folding chair near the back door with a glass of iced tea. He looked calm, which made everyone else look more nervous. I set the pie on the dessert table. Helen hugged me. "Thank you for coming." I said I would. "I know. She looked toward my father. "Thank you. Are they here?" "Not yet. Of course they arrived late." Caleb came through the side gate first, wearing a fitted blue shirt and the expression of a man returning to a room he expected to control. Brooke followed in a cream-colored dress, carrying a bottle of sparkling water like it was a hostess gift. They were holding hands. Helen froze for half a second, then forced herself forward. "Caleb." He hugged her too long. "Missed you, Mom." Brooke hugged Helen next and said, "It's so good to be here." Then Caleb shook my father's hand. Not a hug, a firm, formal shake, like two men meeting to discuss a contract. That was the first sign that Sean and I had guessed correctly. This wasn't only a reunion. Caleb turned toward me. His eyes dropped briefly to the envelope beside my plate, then returned to my face. "Little brother." "Caleb." He stepped closer as if he might hug me, but I didn't move. Brooke smiled softly. "Hi, Connor." "Brooke." She tilted her head, studying me. "You look well." "So do you." Caleb laughed. "Look at us. Adults. Let's not get ahead of ourselves," I said. Sean coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. Everyone settled in. The food went around. Chicken, potato salad, green beans, rolls, sliced tomatoes. Conversation stayed on safe subjects for about 10 minutes. Then Brooke began. She waited until Aunt Grace asked whether they had been doing well. "We have," Brooke said. "It took a lot of work, but we're in a really peaceful place now." Caleb squeezed her hand. "Therapy," he said. "Honesty. Owning the past." I almost choked on my iced tea. Brooke looked directly at me. "I hope you found some peace too, Connor." Sean's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I put my glass down carefully. "I sleep fine." "That's good," she said. "I know some people have a harder time letting go." Caleb smiled at his plate. The attack was soft enough that calling it out would make me look sensitive. Brooke had always been good at that. She could place a knife on the table and then act surprised when someone noticed the blade. "I let go of the marriage years ago," I said. Brooke's smile tightened. "I'm glad. The lies have been more persistent." My mother said, "Connor." I looked at her. "I'm eating dinner." The conversation moved on, but the tone changed. Caleb told a story about a trip he and Brooke had taken. Brooke laughed at everything he said, even the parts that weren't funny. They touched constantly, hand on shoulder, fingers on wrist, her palm resting against his back when she passed behind him. It felt staged. Then my father mentioned updating some family documents. He said it casually while reaching for a roll. "I'll need both of you to review a few things eventually," he said, looking at Caleb and me. Caleb leaned forward. "Is this what we discussed?" Richard's face remained neutral. "We haven't discussed anything recently." "I meant before." "You'll see the current documents when I'm ready." Caleb's smile weakened. "I just think keeping things simple is smart. When the time comes." "The time for what?" Grace asked. Caleb spread his hands. "Nothing dramatic. Dad and I talked years ago about making sure somebody responsible could handle things." Sean looked at me. Brooke pressed 2 fingers against Caleb's arm. He glanced at her and stopped. There it was again. The dinner wasn't just about image repair. Caleb wanted his standing restored before my father announced whatever he had changed. Grace set down her fork. "Why now?" she asked. Caleb looked at her. "Why what? Why come back now? You've skipped 4 Christmases, 3 birthdays, and Richard's retirement dinner." Caleb's expression warmed into something polished. "I missed my family." Grace nodded slowly, unconvinced. Brooke stepped in. We both realized staying away wasn't healthy. Avoidance keeps people trapped in old chapters. I said nothing. That seemed to irritate Caleb more than any argument would have. He began telling stories from when we were younger. In every story, he was the brave one, the funny one, the one who fixed my mistake or got me out of trouble. Some of the memories were real. Some had been bent into a more flattering shape. Then he raised his glass. The conversation faded. "I know this is a little awkward," he said, "but I'm grateful Mom and Dad brought everyone together. Families survive things. People make mistakes. People grow. And at some point, you have to stop punishing everyone for an old chapter." Brooke lifted her glass too. My mother stared down at her plate. Caleb continued. I'm not proud of how things started with Brooke. We've both admitted that. But sometimes something good comes from something that was already broken. I felt Sean's knee press briefly against mine under the table. A reminder. Don't give him the version of you he's been selling. Caleb looked at me. Honestly, Connor, after all these years, you should probably thank me. I freed everyone from a miserable marriage. A few relatives laughed. Not because it was funny, because they were uncomfortable and wanted the moment to pass. Then Caleb added, still mad I won? Brooke laughed too. Caleb, don't start, she said. He's probably still sensitive. I looked at both of them. Good to see you rehearsed. Brooke's face changed. Caleb leaned back in his chair. Come on. It's a joke. Then explain the funny part. The funny part is that it's been 4 years, and you still walk around like we stole your life. You didn't steal my life, I said. You stole the version of it where I still trusted you. Nobody moved. Caleb rolled his eyes. There. That's what I mean. Everything has to be a speech with you. I reached for the envelope and placed it in the center of the table. Are you sure you want the honest version in this room? He looked at the envelope, then at me. Say whatever helps you sleep. My father spoke for the first time in several minutes. Open it. Caleb turned toward him. What? Richard nodded at the envelope. Open it. Caleb laughed once. I don't need to open Connor's scrapbook. I slid the envelope toward Aunt Grace instead. Then Grace can. She looked at me. What is it? The part everyone decided was too uncomfortable to read. Grace opened the envelope. The first page was a simple timeline. Dates. Calls. Messages. The night of the restaurant charge. The date Brooke claimed the affair began. The date she actually told a friend Caleb wanted them to keep things normal. I hadn't included pages of personal conversation. I had reduced it to what could be verified. Grace read the first page, then passed it to Richard. Brooke's chair scraped slightly against the concrete. Connor, this is inappropriate. So was the toast. You brought private information to a family dinner. You brought my private life to family dinners for 4 years. You just changed the facts. Caleb waved a hand. Everyone knows we were involved before the divorce. That's not the story you told. I said the marriage was over. You said the affair started after Brooke and I had separated emotionally. Brooke crossed her arms. We had. That's not a legal date, Brooke. It's not even a date you mentioned to me while we were discussing an anniversary trip. Her cheeks reddened. You were impossible to talk to. Then you could have left. It wasn't that simple. Grace looked up from the restaurant receipt. You said you were with Rachel this night? Brooke glanced at the page. I don't remember every dinner from 4 years ago. I do, I said. It was the first lie I could prove. Caleb shook his head. This is pathetic. I took out my phone. I agree the voicemail was pathetic. His expression changed. I placed the phone on the table and played the recording at low volume. The room had to become quiet to hear it. Caleb's voice came through, blurred by alcohol, but recognizable. You were never enough for her, man. Maybe you should be honest about that. I stopped the recording before the rest. Nobody needed more. Brooke looked at Caleb. You told me you apologized for that. I did apologize. No, I said. You texted, sorry you heard it that way. Sean let out a quiet breath through his nose. Caleb pointed at me. This is exactly why nobody believed you. You keep files. You record everything. You can't let anything die. I didn't record you. You called my phone and left it there. Same difference. No, it's really not. Brooke looked around the table. This is humiliating. I met her eyes. You called it healing when you lied. Don't call it humiliation when I answer. My mother whispered, please. I turned to her. I told you before I came. I could be civil. I wasn't agreeing to be quiet. Caleb shoved his plate forward. Fine. We cheated. There. Is that what you want? Everyone knows. The marriage was miserable. Connor had a breakdown. I was the one helping Dad clean up the mess while he was drinking and sending insane messages. That was the opening. I leaned back. Helping Dad how? Caleb's mouth tightened. You know what I mean. No. Explain it. I was talking to him. Handling things. Making sure you didn't do something stupid. What things? This is ridiculous. My father reached for the bank records in the envelope. Richard stood. He didn't raise his voice. That made the entire table pay attention. I transferred Caleb $32,000 during Connor's divorce, he said. My mother's head snapped toward him. You what? Richard looked at her. I thought the money was being used to protect Connor from financial damage and to pay for help Caleb said Connor refused to accept. Helen stared at Caleb. What help? Caleb pushed back from the table. Dad, we discussed this privately. Yes, Richard said. We did. He held up one of the transfer records. You told me Connor was missing payments, threatening to destroy shared property, and likely to challenge family accounts. You said you needed money to keep the situation contained. Aunt Grace looked at me. Was any of that true? No. Caleb answered before I could say more. He was spiraling. Everyone saw it. I drank too much for 2 months, I said. I sent angry messages. I never missed a mortgage payment. I never threatened property. I never asked Caleb to manage anything. Richard nodded. I verified that. Caleb's confidence began to crack. When, over the last year, Brooke turned toward him. You said the money was a loan. It was. Richard looked at her. No. Brooke's face went pale. Richard continued. The first transfer paid 2 months of Caleb's rent and several credit card balances. The second covered travel and a deposit on an apartment. The third was transferred shortly before he purchased a car. Caleb stood. You're making it sound like I stole from you. You took money under false pretenses. I was under pressure. You created the pressure. My father took another document from a folder beside his chair. I hadn't noticed the folder when I arrived. This was not the only issue. Caleb looked at the folder and stopped moving. Richard removed several pages. 2 years ago, while I was recovering from surgery, Caleb sent me draft language that would have given him expanded authority over family accounts and property if I became unable to manage them. Helen covered her mouth. Grace leaned forward. Richard continued. The draft described Connor as emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible. It recommended excluding him from decision-making because he could not be trusted during a crisis. I felt cold despite the heat under the patio roof. I knew about the transfers. I did not know about the draft documents. I looked at my father. You never told me. No, he said. I should have. Caleb stepped toward him. It was a draft. You asked me to look into options. I asked you to help organize documents. I did not ask you to write your brother out by using lies you created. That's not what happened. Richard took out one final page. This is a notarized statement confirming that Caleb has no authority over my accounts, property, medical decisions, or estate administration. Any prior document or draft suggesting otherwise is revoked. Caleb stared at him. You're cutting me out? I said authority. I did not say inheritance. You brought everyone here to embarrass me. Richard's expression hardened. I brought everyone here because your lies were told to everyone. Brooke stood now too. She looked from Caleb to the bank records. You told me your father helped us because he understood what Connor was like. Caleb snapped his head toward her. Don't. You said he knew Connor was unstable. Brooke, did you use the divorce to get money? Caleb laughed, but there was nothing relaxed in it. You knew we needed help. I knew you borrowed money. You knew enough to keep quiet. Her face tightened. What does that mean? It means you were fine with handled when it made you look innocent. The polished couple disappeared in less than 10 seconds. Brooke took a step away from him. You told me this was handled. And you told everyone Connor drove you into my bed. We both cleaned up the story. My mother made a sound like she had been struck. Brooke looked around the table and seemed to realize there was nowhere safe to place her eyes. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, I told her, just with softer words. Caleb pointed at me again. You happy now? I thought about the question. For years earlier, I would have wanted him to feel what I felt. I would have wanted the entire room to turn on him so completely that he understood what isolation was. But sitting there, watching him lose control, I didn't feel happy. I felt finished. No, I said. I'm not happy. I'm done carrying this. Aunt Grace looked directly at Caleb. Is any of what Richard said untrue? Caleb rubbed a hand over his mouth. It's not that simple. Grace nodded. That usually means no. He looked at Brooke as if expecting support. She had moved several feet away from him. One of my cousins started to say, maybe everybody should calm down, but Grace cut him off. No, we've been calm for 4 years. Calm is how we let the lies settle. She turned to me. I owe Connor an apology before I ask him another question. That was the first apology of the night. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't repair anything instantly, but it named the right person. My mother sat with both hands in her lap. I didn't know about the money, she said. I know. I didn't know about the documents. I know. She looked up at me. But I knew enough. Nobody interrupted her. I knew they lied about the affair. I knew you were being asked to act like it was equal. I thought asking you to forgive was keeping the family together. I waited. She swallowed. I wanted the family back so badly I forgot you were the one we left outside. My throat tightened, and I hated that it did. I appreciate you saying it, I told her. It doesn't fix 4 years. I know. And I'm not ready to act like tonight fixes us. I know that too. My father sat down again. He looked older than he had when dinner began. Connor, he said, I believed you about the affair. I did not understand the financial part until later. Then why did you stay quiet? Because I dislike public conflict. That isn't a virtue when the lie is public. No, he said. It isn't. There was no defense in his voice, which made it harder to stay angry and impossible to let him off the hook. He continued. I waited to see whether my oldest son would tell the truth on his own. He didn't. I also told myself I needed complete proof before I spoke. That was partly caution and partly cowardice. Caleb scoffed. So now I'm just the family criminal? Richard looked at him. You betrayed your brother. Then you used his reaction to that betrayal as a story to obtain money and influence. I'm not choosing the word for you. Caleb's face reddened. I helped this family for years. That does not purchase immunity. Brooke picked up her purse. I'm leaving. Caleb turned toward her. Seriously? You lied to me. Everyone at the table seemed to have the same thought, but Grace said it. That appears to be a problem for you now. Brooke flinched. She looked at me. For 1 second, I saw the familiar expression she used during the divorce. The one that said she was about to shift the conversation into a place where she could control it. Connor, I know you think. No. She stopped. I'm not doing this with you. I was going to apologize. Then say what you're apologizing for. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I waited. Finally, she said, for how everything happened. That means nothing. I'm sorry you were hurt. That means even less. Brooke looked toward Helen as if she wanted rescue. My mother stayed seated. I said, you don't get to turn a decision into weather. It didn't just happen. You lied to me for 8 months. You slept with my brother. You let him use my name to explain money I never received. Then you spent 4 years describing my reaction as the real problem. I didn't know all of that. You knew enough to protect the story. Caleb laughed bitterly. There it is. Connor's closing argument. I turned to him. You want it shorter? He spread his hands. Go ahead. You were my brother. You chose to compete with me in the one place I never knew we were competing. Then you needed me to be weak so what you did could look like winning. His expression changed. That one landed. I stood and picked up the documents. I'm not asking anyone here to choose me, I said. I'm telling you what access to me costs now. Honesty. No one spoke. I will not attend gatherings where the affair is called messy, complicated, or something that just happened. I will not accept apologies that avoid naming what was done. I will not let Caleb use my name to explain financial dishonesty. If anyone repeats the old version, I will send them the timeline and the records. Caleb shook his head. Threats now? That's not a threat. It's a correction policy. Sean looked down, but I saw the corner of his mouth move. I continued. I'm not asking for a vote. I'm not staying for a debate. Anyone who respects those boundaries can contact me. Anyone who thinks peace requires me to stay quiet can keep the peace without me. My mother started to stand. Connor, please don't leave angry. I'm not angry. Caleb laughed again. Sure. Sean stood beside me. I looked at Caleb. I'm not angry enough to stay. That ended it. I picked up my keys and left the pecan pie. Sean followed me through the side gate. Behind us, voices began rising. Brooke accused Caleb of hiding the estate documents. Caleb told her she was trying to save herself. Grace told someone to stop moving the bank records. My mother called my father's name. The gate shut, and the noise became muffled. Sean walked me to my car. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he said, You okay? I leaned against the driver's door and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 4 years. Yeah. You didn't look angry in there. No. You looked finished. That was exactly it. The drive home was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. My hands shook once at a stoplight, not from rage, but from the delayed release of having spent an entire evening refusing to become what they expected. When I got home, I put the envelope on the kitchen counter. The same counter where I had signed the divorce papers. My phone started buzzing. 2 cousins sent messages that began with some version of, "I had no idea." One relative wrote, "I'm sorry for believing the easier story." Aunt Grace sent only, "I meant what I said." My father called. I let it go to voicemail. Then Brooke texted, "I think we should talk like adults when emotions aren't so high." The wording was polished, calm, and completely familiar. It implied that the problem was the atmosphere, not the facts. It placed us both inside the same emotional storm, so she wouldn't have to stand alone in what she had done. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Not because I had nothing left to say. Because the conversation no longer belonged to her. Caleb sent nothing. The next morning, my father came by without warning. I almost didn't open the door, but when I saw him through the window, he looked less like the man who had stood at the table with documents, and more like my father carrying the weight of a decision he had delayed too long. I let him in. He sat at the kitchen table. I stayed standing for a moment, then took the chair across from him. "I should have told you as soon as I found the drafts," he said. "Yes. I thought I could resolve it privately." "You thought privacy would preserve the family." "Yes. It preserved Caleb." He nodded. "I know." I asked him how he discovered the money problem. He said that while organizing old tax records, he noticed the transfers he had made to Caleb. He had always believed the money went toward legal help, missed bills, and short-term support for me. "When you never thanked me, I was offended," he admitted. I stared at him. "You were offended that I didn't thank you for money I never knew existed." "Yes." "That's almost funny." "It isn't." "No." He said Caleb had avoided giving clear records. At first, Richard accepted explanations about privacy and cash expenses. Later, when Caleb began asking about estate authority again, Richard reviewed everything. The car purchase, the apartment deposit, the emails describing me as unstable, the draft documents. "Why did you send me the bank statement before dinner?" "I wanted you to know enough that you would not be blindsided." "You still blindsided me." "Yes." I looked at him for a long time. "You don't get credit for defending me after allowing the lie to become family history." "I know. I'm not cutting you off. But I'm not pretending this was heroic. I'm not asking you to." That answer mattered. Richard left after 20 minutes. We did not hug. He said he would provide me copies of everything that used my name and a written statement confirming I had never received or requested those funds. That afternoon, Helen called. Her apology was clumsy, but specific. She apologized for telling me there were 2 sides when she knew one side had hidden an affair. She apologized for asking me to forgive Caleb before he had admitted what he did. She apologized for treating my presence at family events as a test of my maturity while Caleb and Brooke stayed away without criticism. "I thought if you were the stronger one, you could carry more," she said. "That's how families punish the person least likely to collapse." "I understand that now. I think you understand part of it." "That's fair." She asked whether she could come by later in the week. I told her not yet. She said okay. That was new. Over the next month, the consequences became clearer. My father's attorney completed updated documents removing Caleb from every position of authority. Richard also sent Caleb a formal demand for a full accounting of the transferred money. Caleb insisted the funds were gifts. Richard had messages showing they were requested for specific supposed emergencies involving me. He did not immediately sue, but the possibility was no longer theoretical. Several relatives apologized. Some did it well. Some apologized for all the hurt on every side, which was just the old story in a cleaner shirt. I did not answer those. Aunt Grace called and admitted she had accepted the easier version because it allowed her to avoid deciding whether Caleb should still be invited. "I told myself neutrality was fair," she said. "It usually favors whoever already has the advantage." "Yes," she said. "I see that now." Brooke and Caleb separated less than 2 weeks after the dinner. I heard that from Sean, who heard it from Grace. I didn't ask for details. Apparently, Brooke believed Caleb had endangered her financially and lied about his position with my father. Caleb believed Brooke abandoned him the moment being with him stopped looking like a victory. Maybe both were true. Brooke emailed me once more. This time she wrote a longer message. She admitted the affair had started before our marriage ended. She admitted she had let people believe I was controlling because it made her choices easier to defend. Then she wrote that Caleb had manipulated her too. I believed he probably had. I also knew manipulation did not erase participation. I saved the email because it corrected the record. I did not reply. Caleb contacted our mother repeatedly and accused Richard of using the dinner to destroy him. He said I had planned the entire thing with Dad. I hadn't. That may be the only part of the night that still bothers me. My father and I had been acting separately, both holding pieces of the same truth. If Caleb had not mocked me, I might never have opened the envelope. If he had answered Grace directly, perhaps the evening would have ended differently. But arrogance is a kind of confession. Caleb had been protected by the family's discomfort for so long that he believed he could say anything in the same room where I had been expected to remain polite. He thought my restraint was fear. It wasn't. It was preparation. I still see my parents, but not the way I did before. My mother has stopped inviting people under vague promises of civility. She tells me directly who will be present. When she apologizes now, she names the action. My father and I are rebuilding something more slowly. He gave me the written statement and copies of the estate documents. I told him I wanted a relationship, not compensation. He said he understood. I don't know if he fully does, but he is trying without demanding that I reward him for it. I have not spoken to Caleb. A few relatives think exposing the bank records and estate issue at dinner was too much. They say I should have handled that part privately, especially since the affair evidence was enough to correct the story. Maybe they have a point. But the money was taken under my name. My supposed instability was used as the reason. Caleb made the lie public every time he described himself as the person who had cleaned up my breakdown. He didn't get to use me as a shield in public and demand privacy when the shield was removed. The dinner did not feel like revenge. Revenge, at least in my imagination, was supposed to feel dramatic, triumphant, loud. This felt like setting down a box I had been carrying so long that I had forgotten the weight wasn't part of me. A month after the dinner, my mother invited me for lunch. Just her, my father, Sean, and Aunt Grace. Before I agreed, I asked, "Who else?" She answered immediately, "No one." No surprises? No surprises. I brought pecan pie. When I set it on the table, Helen looked at the crust and sighed. "One day I'm going to make one better than yours. Not if history is evidence." Grace laughed. My father did too, quietly. It was not the family we had before. I didn't want that family back. That family had depended on pretending. This one, smaller and more careful, had at least begun with the truth. I didn't get my marriage back that night. I got my name back. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.